Hello and welcome to the Voice of Liberty podcast. Tonight I want to talk about hypocrisy and protests. The reason I want to talk about hypocrisy and protests tonight is because yet again we saw the NFAC, Not Fucking Around Coalition, march in defense of Black lives. We saw them march in defense of those who the Black Lives Matter movement seeks to protect. We saw them march against systemic racism. But we more clearly saw today than we did when they marched in Georgia on the Stonewall Monument, the reaction from the alt-right. The reaction from the 3%ers and the reaction from those who typically parade around with guns at protests. See, we saw something really interesting today when they marched on Louisville. About 500 members of the NFAC showed up, armed, masked, and prepared. They weren't tactical. They, in fact, were dressed in all the appropriate items, carrying the appropriate gear in case shit hit the fan. They actually were prepared. See, before I get into the hypocrisy here, and before I get into protests and carrying open possession, all of that, I want to touch on something really specific here. When you look at 3%ers and you look at the alt-right, when you look at those of the Boogaloo movement, when you look at generally anybody who is out there open carrying, ignoring their race, generally what we see is a bunch of people dressed in camo with plate carriers that may or may not have something in them, wearing a bunch of badges that mean absolutely nothing, carrying guns that really aren't going to be useful in an urban tactical environment, and generally unprepared. When you look at the 3%ers or the members of the Boogaloo movement, when you look at those on the alt-right who are generally out there open carrying and being organized, some are carrying radios, some aren't. Some are wearing boots, some are wearing sneakers. Some are wearing plate carriers, some aren't wearing plate carriers. Some are carrying the biggest gun they can possibly carry without realizing that it would be absolutely ineffective in an urban environment. And some are carrying just a pistol, which would be outgunned in an urban environment. Beyond that, when you look at them, you got some that are amazingly fit and some that are just absolutely out of shape, overweight, and I can guarantee you would be the first to fall if shit actually hit the fan. And that's what scares them. Because when you look at the NFAC, and I'm going to bring this photo up one more time, what you're seeing here is not people who are tactical. You are not seeing people who are out of shape. You are not seeing people who are just flaunting a gun to get attention. You are seeing people who are wearing plate carriers and wearing vests that are actually effective in an urban environment. You are seeing people carrying extra magazines, which is needed in an urban environment. You are seeing people wearing boots or tactical shoes that are capable of keeping them safe in an urban environment. Beyond that, you are seeing people carrying weapons which are extremely useful in an urban environment. See, the difference between the NFAC and the 3%ers and the Boogaloo and the alt-right is the NFAC is actually organized. The NFAC actually is prepared. They clearly state that they don't want to have to discharge their weapon, but they will in defense of their people. See, they're taking the appropriate steps. They're being responsible about how they display this, and they're also being prepared. In that photo, and in the videos from today, pretty much every one of them was carrying a radio. Some of them were carrying actual in-ear devices, but every one of them had some form of radio connection on them. They were able, if something went down, to communicate. They were able to remotely communicate back and forth and coordinate the offensive or the defensive, whatever it might be. Now, I know some people are going to say how an NFAC member today accidentally discharged his weapon and struck 3 of his comrades. And that's unfortunate. It happens. Wouldn't be the first time in an alt-right 3%er or Boogaloo protest. Just saying. But to get to the heart of what I wanted to talk about today, the NFAC shows up in Louisville, about 500 of them. They take the federal Capitol building's stairs and they demand justice for Breonna Taylor. In response to this, the alt-right showed up. And I wish I had thought to download some of the photos of it, because they were entirely outnumbered, outgeared, and out-tacticaled. The alt-right showed up because, of course, a group of black people carrying guns and demanding justice is scary. In fact, there were people on the alt-right and in the 3%er groups saying how this was wrong, how they shouldn't be doing this. You had Trump supporters in all the different live videos screaming about how this is just messed up. They shouldn't be doing this. They can't do this. How dare the black people rise up and demand justice? How dare they gather together? How dare they exercise their Second Amendment rights? And how dare they actually coordinate and use gear that is tactical? How dare they? That's what I saw. I saw it on all different news sites, from local Louisville news to national affiliates. Those were in the comments. I saw people in 3%er groups and members of the Boogaloo groups screaming about how wrong it was. How dare they show up and do that? That's wrong. Ignore the fact that they show up with their guns for a end the shutdown rally. How dare they show up to almost any rally, or ignore the fact that they show up to almost any rally carrying their guns, carrying their ineffective tactical gear, and ignore the fact that they're totally unorganized. But that's what they fear. The thing is, black people being organized, heavily armed, with effective weapons, carrying effective gear, wearing the proper attire is scary. Because in these 3%ers' minds, in these alt-righters' minds, in these Boogaloo supporters' minds, they had the advantage. They had the edge. They were the ones that were armed. They were the ones with the plate carriers. They had all the fancy Velcro tags. They thought they had the advantage until the NFAC showed up and proved how unprepared they were for an actual conflict if it were to occur. The NFAC is taking the fight to the streets. See, the NFAC, they're tired of watching the 3%ers and the Boogaloo and the alt-right carry in public defending the things that which systemically keep them down. They're tired of watching these people defend the things that they are trying to change, that we are trying to change as supporters of them. And they're taking the message right to where it needs to be taken. See, that's the power of responsibly open carrying your weapons. That image of the NFAC marching, coordinated, that is a literal perfect militant setup. They are in perfect rows. They're in perfect columns. They are set up and prepared. They're not in step. That's no big deal. The big deal about it is that they're coordinated and they're organized. I can't hammer that in enough. They are ready to defend their brothers and sisters. They are ready to actually defend the people being attacked. And unlike the alt-right, unlike the 3%ers, and unlike the Boogaloo, they will actually put their money where the mouth is. See, the 3%ers and the 3%ers and the Boogaloo, they constantly scream about how they want to fight fascism. They want to fight against authoritarian measures. They will not stand to see totalitarianism in this country. They constantly talk about where a person's rights are being violated, they'll be there to defend that person. As I talked about in a video earlier this week, though, Somehow that didn't happen in Portland. Somehow Portland's an outlier. And somehow these people in the 3%er and the Boogaloo movements have to know what side of the political spectrum that person's on. Yeah, if they're a communist or a socialist or a Democrat, shit, their rights don't matter. Let them get violated by the feds. I don't care. But see, the NFAC doesn't think that way. The NFAC, they're out there to defend people's rights. They're out there to promote change. And they are out there trying to do it peacefully with the clear and obvious statement that if it has to be done violently, it will be done violently. I would not be shocked if these folks spent many hours of their weeks on firing ranges practicing and honing their shot. I would not be shocked if they practiced somewhere urban tactics. I would not be shocked if these people have read the military's own guides on urban warfare. And I would not be shocked if these people might have some former military training. See, that's what sets them apart. They are putting the energy into this. They are putting the time into it. And they are ensuring that they are prepared and they are ready to take up the fight. When the NFAC member today accidentally discharged his weapon, or her weapon, I'm not 100% sure who it was, you saw the surrounding members of the NFAC assume tactical positions. Their guns were sighted. They were in a position that would provide the most stable shot needed, and those closest engaged in proper field medical assistance. That's what preparedness is. So let's just remember something here. For the alt-right, gathering in their ineffective tactical gear, with their ineffective weapons, not properly organized, and having no way of communicating, that's okay. At any protest, doesn't matter. Whether it's a protest against Planned Parenthood, against the Democratic Convention, against a socialist gathering, against just a march for Black Lives, that's okay. For 3%ers, it's the same thing. It's okay if they show up to an End the Shutdown rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That's perfectly fine. Same with the Boogaloo. It's okay. They're fine. But the moment 500 coordinated, tactical Black people show up to demand justice for a crime which should have been answered by now, that's a fucking problem. That's a travesty. And they shouldn't be exercising their rights. That's the message that they're conveying right now. So, as I always say, be a voice of liberty and stand up for the rights of people to tactically and responsibly coordinate a very well-organized protest and awaken the voice of liberty right now.